Good. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to another JCLP President's Forum program. Many of you have been on previous ones, so you know that we've tried to provide quality programming on a whole variety of issues, and most of the issues had to do with uh, the synagogues themselves and how you as presidents have to deal with issues such as engagement and leadership succession and outreach and so on. Security obviously is a big one, and our hearts go out to a Beth Israel congregation in Jackson, Mississippi. We and so many others have reached out. They have a rebuilding campaign. They're identifying what their Judaic and other needs are. And as we get more information, we'll pass that on to you. We also are going to be having some additional JCLP programs later in the year, one on cemeteries and one on engagement. We have some really incredible programming going on in synagogues to reach out to the unaffiliated that we want to share with all of you. We created a peer support group. We had our first meeting of about 10 people to get to know each other more intimately and to discuss some issues that are of importance to them. Anybody in the forum, if they want to be part of the peer support group, you can let me know. Also, as you know, the Marcus Foundation has been a major supporter of JCLP, and they're going to provide funding for an in-person conference in Atlanta, probably around August 17th, around there. All accommodations will be taken care of, hotel, food, and so on. You'll just need to make transportation, but getting into Atlanta is pretty easy. So hopefully we'll have a good representation from you and your colleagues on later in the year. As I always say, if you have any issues that you would like to have this forum deal with, just let me know. This forum is typified by the most important question, which is what's in it for me. So you feel free to ask whatever you're interested in, and we will make that happen. What we're going to do is tonight is I'll give a brief introduction of Professor Stein. Then he'll speak for 30 or 35 minutes and then open up the floor for the Zoom, the screen for questions. And they must be questions, no essays or dissertations or anything like that, but just questions for either based on what Ken has talked about this evening or anything else that comes to mind. It's a vast topic, and he wants to have as much time devoted to what's of interest to you. After this program, we'll have this recording available to you and the rest of the forum. Ken will also send an email to me with links to documents and other material that will be supportive of what will be in support of what he has said, as well as larger issues facing with Israel facing in the Middle East. So this is going to be a very instructive program. The bio that he gave me starts off, well, first of all, as you will soon find out, he's one of the most respected American scholars of modern Middle Eastern history. And for almost 5 decades, he has taught at Emory University. And for almost 4 decades, I've had the pleasure of knowing Ken. I was in the Wexner Leadership Program. He was our teacher for a few weeks, led a mission to Israel and Jordan. One of the best teachers that I've ever had, because he has us think. He's open to anything that we want to say, and he's so knowledgeable. Ken is the founding president and chief content writer at the Center for Israel Education at Emory University. And the materials of the center may be found in English, Spanish, Hebrew, as well as demand self-learning units. And Ken will talk about the center at the end of his presentation. He's written 6 books on a host of issues dealing with the Middle East. He has been a professor of Emory at Emory University, as I said, for almost 5 decades. This is really very important. He's distinguished by his unwavering commitment to intellectual honesty and historical rigor. His presentations are grounded in extensive use of primary sources, and much is taken from Arabic and Hebrew sources, allowing history to speak for itself rather than for bending to ideological agendas. In an area of polarization and slogan-driven discourse, Ken offers something increasingly rare, the ability to explain complexity without distortion, to challenge false narratives with evidence rather than rhetoric, and to cultivate historical thinking rather than political indoctrination. So without further ado, it's my honor and pleasure to present to you Professor Ken Stein, who will be with us for the next hour. Ken.
Thank you. So can everyone hear me okay? Yes, audio's fine.
Yes.
And you can see the PowerPoint presentation, or do I have to
Not
hit?
yet. Not yet.
Okay. Let me take a minute, tell you a little bit about where I'm coming from. Um, my undergraduate training focused on the Middle East, graduate training all on the Middle East. And I spent 2 years in Israel, left just before the 1973 war. I had to bury myself in archives in Kiryat Eshkol, not too far from Mount Scopus. And I became a devotee of what the document said. Gladly, I went to Israel not knowing what my dissertation would be or the topic, and I found new materials that no one had ever worked on dealing with Palestinian, Arab, and Israeli society in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and sort of spent the rest of my life trying to figure out how the Zionists won and why the Palestinians didn't. And the socioeconomic gaps were enormous. Pretty much came to the conclusion that 1939 and 1945 was an emotional outburst that was terrible for Jews, and the aftermath, Zionists use it as an opportunity to push forward the idea of the United Nations recognizing the state of Israel. It sounds like heresy, but my belief is a Jewish state would have come into being even if 6 million Jews hadn't died, because Zionists had put their shoulders to the wheel and did some strategic planning. When I came to Emory, my interest was teaching as many students as I could and using the documents or the devotion to documents. Maybe I'm even an idol worshiper when it comes to documents. And having the kids unfold the story. And then I found out adults and adult education programs and scholar and resident programs that adults too would say, after they looked at a document, say, you know what, I grew up in a congregational school on Long Island, but I never learned that. That's interesting. Do you have some more? And that's the best question any student or any learner can pose to a teacher is, can you put more wood on my fire? And, they feed each other. And so tonight, what I'd like to do is talk to you a little bit about Israel at 77, what is finished and what is not. And in your minds, I'd like you to think about what the United States was in when it was 77 years old, which would have put it someplace around 1853. And we hadn't yet in America figured out what our western borders were. We hadn't quite gone through this traumatic war, major civil war. We were still a society that said all men are created equal, but they really weren't. And women would only get the right to vote in, maybe 1920. So America was truly unfinished before Lincoln became president. And the American Revolution began maybe from 1620 until about 1650 or 1670, when you had the incubation of the Pilgrims and the desire to control their own destiny, which is precisely a hallmark of what we think about when it comes to Zionism. I take it you can see the screen?
But we can only see your icons. The PowerPoint's not on.
The PowerPoint.
Glad to see I'm not the only one with a really busy desktop.
No, this has to do with I'm so sorry. You don't see that, do you?
Nope, not yet.
Oh, darn, we had it on a moment ago, and how's that?
Nope, we're back to the group.
You're able to open it up on your own machine and then hit share.
There we go.
You got it?
Yes.
Great. So I'm not going to breathe because I'm afraid the air will change it. So as we march forward, take a look at these two photographs. It's emblematic of why a Jewish state was needed, or why a Jewish state evolved. You recognize the folks in the photograph on the left. By the way, these photographs were given to me by the Weitzman Archives to use. So with that as a hint, the middle man on this photograph on the left is Chaim Weitzman. And the man with his hands folded, you notice his white locks, hair, Ben Gurion, and the one who's sort of putting his head in his hand is Eliezer Kaplan, who was the financial advisor to the Jewish Agency at the time. And this is March 1939. And these gentlemen already have an inkling of the Nuremberg laws. They've already heard stories about Kristallnacht. And they are about to absorb a major shock from the British that says, you can't immigrate too many more Jews here to Palestine, and we're going to deny you the opportunity to buy land like you'd like to. Now, that's the emotional view on the left. The one on the right is September 78. Any thoughts about September 78, or it's a rhetorical question? It's the Knesset debating whether the Israeli parliament should accept or not accept the outline of the agreement, or the agreement's actually signed at Camp David between Begin and Sadat, with Carter there as a catalyst. And so the folks in the back row, beginning on the left, that's Perez, Yuval Allon, and Abba Eban. names many of you probably recollect and even recognize. Left on the front row is Simcha Ehrlich, the finance minister, Menachem Begin, Ezra Weitzman, and looking over the top, the balding man with the hair is Yigal Yadin. So the difference between the two photographs is what Israel is all about, Jewish self-determination. And the photograph on the left, obviously, the Zionists don't yet have a state. They can't defend themselves. They're still the object in someone else's sentence. They're in the process of taking destiny into their own hands, but they haven't yet fully realized it. And the question that I pose is, if your children and or grandchildren are telling Israel's story, where do they begin? What do you say about Israel being finished or unfinished? Or ask yourself the question, where is it finished and where is it not? Now, I alluded to earlier the notion that Israel is both finished and unfinished, but it's not yet fully formed. And I think many people who look at the state of Israel today believe that it's a fully grown adult who has, an enormous gross domestic product, most powerful military in the Middle East, and yet it still hasn't resolved some of the issues that make it edgy and make diaspora Jews edgy about it. Oh, Noah's going to send to you an email, and the comments I'm going to make tonight are going to appear in the email as an attachment, Israel Unfinished. There's an attachment about what we do at CIE, and also an attachment about me. But you don't have to scribble and write down notes real quickly, because you'll get this all as a PDF as Noah forwards it to you. Figured it would be the easiest thing to do. It's already in Noah's inbox. So what did Israel do that is now finished? It established Jewish sovereignty in Eretz Yisrael. It generated a renewed sense of peoplehood. As a state, it received recognition by the United Nations, by the United States, 6 Arab countries, Egypt in 79, Jordan in 94, Abraham Accord countries in 2020. Even the PLO recognized Israel in 1993. Israel learned that being recognized diplomatically does not mean it's accepted in the Middle East. There's a difference between recognition and acceptance. And I ask you to make that nuanced distinction, if you will. No stronger lesson could come home to the Israelis than what happened on October 7th, 2023. there are elements, many elements in the Muslim and Arab world that reject the very concept of a sovereign Jewish state, of any Jewish presence west of the Jordan River. Perhaps world Jewry drank the Kool-Aid after Sadat went to Jerusalem in 77 and believed that there was a major right-hand turn that was occurring, and the Arab world was about to accept Jewish sovereignty. But the Sadat visit, where he broke a psychological barrier, was not embraced by his colleagues or his allies. In fact, Egypt was now then isolated from the rest of the Arab world. Sadat needed peace with Israel. He didn't necessarily want it. And that's another nuanced distinction I'm asking you to make. But perhaps Jews, for so long in the historical DNA, have been abused by so many others. Parents, grandparents, former generations that lived in Kiev or Lisbon, Marrakesh or Tripoli. Perhaps Jews wanted it so much that they failed to see the reality that was in front of them. And I think that was a major mistake of the Israeli government on October 7th, or October 6th, actually, because they believed if they could accommodate the Palestinians with an economic well-being by putting money in their pocket, by allowing them to work inside Gaza and take that money home and put food on their table, their ideology could be neutralized and they might not hate Israel and they might not hate Jews. And lo and behold, we in the United States and Jews throughout the world were also shocked and rocked out of our complacency by the anti-Semitism and the anti-Jewish and the anti-Zionist and the anti-Israeli remarks that flooded the public square, that drenched American campuses. We have become so accustomed to being in a law firm, to being an accounting firm, by having business partners, by teaching in a school with non-Jews, by having civic equality in the United States. We thought that meant that Jews or Israel was accepted. Now, I have to make a distinction here, because not every Jew in America identifies with the state of Israel. Like some Jews in America don't even want to think about Israel as being part of their identity. They would just as soon cast it aside. But perhaps American Jewry, since Israel's creation in 1948, has decided, without necessarily voting for it, they've decided that Israel's successes are our successes. And Israel has been very successful in defending itself. 67, the 73 war came out with Israel on top. But Israel also faced 2 Palestinian uprisings in the 80s and then 2000, and then 5 wars with Hamas. And when you step back and you look down from Pluto, you say to yourself, yeah, Israel is finished in terms of a gross domestic product of $550 billion and the strongest military in the Middle East, and some of the greatest technology that's unfolding and jumping into the marketplace on a regular basis. But Israel has not normalized the Jewish condition, which was one of the major goals of Zionism that was articulated before Herzl in the 1880s and 90s. It was articulated by Jews in the Eastern Mediterranean, Alkali and Kalischer, and also articulated by Nordau, one of Herzl's best friends, who said the only solution to anti-Semitism was for us to have a state of our own. Well, we got a state of our own. And yet, it's not fully embraced. And the argument that's put forward by those who want to see Israel go away, that Jews are fake, Jews are not a nation, Jews are not a people. They never had two sovereign states in this land west of the Jordan River, and they should really go back to where they came from, which is part of what one read in the Arabic media in October, November of 2023. You see, you don't deserve to be here. What Hamas is doing is right. So the normalization has not been complete. And I might suggest to you that as Jews, our condition, because we are minorities wherever we live, and Israel is a minority in the Middle East, even though it's a majority Jewish state, Israel is still considered by some to be alien and a transplant and not deserving. But Israel has succeeded in absorbing waves of Jewish immigration. More than half the Jewish world now lives in the state of Israel. We've developed a sense of pride and power. Israel has probably made diaspora Jewry stronger. And we have engaged others on a regular basis to support the state and to support our freedom of worship wherever we may be able to do so. Now, I know diasporas outside of the United States are very different diasporas than the ones that are here. I mean, diasporas in Chile, Argentina, France, Belgium, Australia, wherever they may be, they have a very different sense of security than we enjoy in America. It is enormous. And sometimes, because there are 5.5 or 6 million of us in this country, we forget that the other 1.2 million Jews who aren't in Israel and may not be in the United States have a very different sense of day-to-day living because they can't trust their national governments as much as we have, regardless of whether it's Democrat or Republican, whether you like Trump or Biden, or you like Obama or Bush. I'm not preaching to a Republican or Democratic audience here. I'm speaking about the Jewish condition, and I'm speaking about the state of Israel. Israel hasn't defined its final borders. It hasn't defined its final relationships with its neighbors. And certainly the United States did that by the 1920s after the Mexican War, and we've had pretty good relations with Canada for as long as it takes until someone says we want to annex it. Israel hasn't been able to fully reconcile the role of religion and state. What role? Well, I can't say that we have in America either, but and I think it would be fair to say that American Jewry doesn't know their own history as much as they probably should. We are the only Jewish generation living anywhere, ones who live in America, who don't fluently speak a Jewish language. Maybe 15% of American Jews can read Hebrew, and maybe 10% can read a text. And I think I'm being overly generous to say there may be 600,000 Jews, if there are 6 million in the United States, who can read Hebrew or speak Yiddish or Ladino. We think being Jewish sometimes is having a bagel or knish or matzo balls. Maybe being Jewish should be, how did we get here? What mistakes and what successes did we have? And maybe we should learn more about the pride and the sacrifice and the perseverance that took us to make it in America, or for someone to, get to Palestine in the 1920s as a 25-year-old and serve in the Palmach and then in the IDF and then start a business and raise a family and have 6 grandkids. Diaspora Jewry and Israel Jewry are very similar. We celebrate the same holidays, but we're also very dissimilar in the sense of what does community mean and what does religion mean. And we can become emotionally connected by tragedy. A pogrom, the Holocaust, October 2023. We can have commemorative ceremonies. We can light yahrzeit candles. But is that sufficient in being Jewish? Do our federations raise money only for card increase annually? Does anyone put a criteria on, well, I learned X amount more about who I am and where my family came from this year than I did last? Now, I'm an educator. I have a bias. I believe everyone should just dive right into those documents and eat them up. There's an issue which is worth dwelling upon, and that is we have perhaps become, I don't want to say consumed, but maybe overly focused on our ability to change the status quo. When in fact, there are others who don't want us to change the status quo. And somehow we blame ourselves if some sort of result is not the outcome. Let me just dwell for a moment about Israel's neighborhood. The region in which Israel lives is not like someone going from Brooklyn to Queens or from Sherman Oaks to San Diego. or Chicago to St. Louis. A very different world. And the politics of the region are determined about where you live. If you control land, if you control oil or oil power, meaning petrodollars, and in the Middle East, that makes you one of the 4 countries that are dominant. And what is the common denominator? Is that the 4 at the bottom of this list, none of the ones that dominated the Arab world in the 50s and 60s are to be seen. Syria, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia has only emerged in the last 10 years. Well, the Middle East today is still dominated by the power and the influence of where you're located. Why does Israel, you see the map? Why is Israel interested in Somaliland? Because it's the access from the Arabian Sea up the Red Sea to Israel's southern port of Eilat. Why is it mandatory for the United States to have a positive relationship with Egypt? Because Egypt controls the 106-mile-long Suez Canal. Why does the United States have a positive relationship with Turkey? In part because it blocks or allows the United States to block Russian access from here through here. I mean, Israel happens to be in a very important geographic region, but it's a region of contention and tension. Would you withdraw unilaterally from the West Bank after what you learned about October 2023? You withdrew unilaterally from Gaza in 2006, and it ended up being in Hamas's hands. You withdrew unilaterally from Lebanon in 2000. And if you don't withdraw unilaterally from the West Bank, there's no possibility of a Palestinian state. And if there's no possibility of a Palestinian state, that means the status quo remains. And maybe one of your personal goals and objectives is to see a 2-state solution because you think it's the right thing to do. But is it the best thing to do for Israel's long-term security? Then you have to ask yourself the question, will the Palestinian state make Jordan and Israel more stable? Or the Middle East more stable? When Syria and Iraq and Iran are not stable? You could withdraw from Sinai in 79 because the rest of the Middle East was pretty status quo. In fact, you can say the fact that there was a Cold War, there was a status quo of tension. So I think it's important for American Jews, world Jews, Americans in general, to understand the strategic value of this region and to understand the things that you can't do even though you'd like to do. I'm not coming down hard on anyone who has a political view. I'm merely trying to state for you what is the underlying context on the considerations that are necessary. Stepping back for a moment, there's a major shift in world Jewry from the 1840s, 1880s until 2020. Jews went from non-democratic societies to democratic societies. They went to places where they could influence their own future. So they went to Boston, Washington, New York, Charleston, Jacksonville, Greensboro, Greenville, whatever other green you have in North Carolina and South Carolina, and there are many green somethings. Australia, South Africa, Latin America. Jews voted with their feet. And because they did, they probably survived what otherwise would have happened to them from 39 to 45. In other words, they got out of harm's way. So you're going to get the handout from Noah, and I think we're at 7:45. That means I've been at it for about 35 minutes, right, Noah? So let me switch for a moment from this. Israel is still in the process of being finished, and I think we as American Jews need to help it get finished by supporting the differences between us, and don't assume that everyone has the same point of view that we have when we look in the mirror every morning. I'm going to spend 5 more minutes and take a look at the 2023-2025 Hamas-Israel war. It changed the way Israelis looked at the Palestinians, and it changed because of Israel's decision not just to neutralize Hamas, but decided to neutralize the axis of evil that included Hezbollah. And when you when you destroyed Hezbollah, you also were undermining the Syrian regime at the same time that was supporting. So after 2 years, and all of the difficulties that Israel suffered, the hostages, the hundreds of thousands of Israelis having to move south to the center of the country to survive or to get away from harm's way. Iranian swarm missile attacks in April and October of 2024. And to Israel's delight, it wasn't just the United States that came to Israel's aid. It was Jordan and Saudi Arabia that also aided Israel in pushing back these missiles and drones that were tossed at Israel's civilian centers. There's no question, as a result of this war, the United States-Israel relationship is the deepest and most profound that it's ever been since Harry Truman. Amazing. And it wasn't just Trump, it was Biden too. I mean, Biden called it evil. And Trump sent in B-2 bombers to destroy Iran's or denigrate Iran's nuclear facilities. As a minority, Jews have always looked to the local king or prince or pope or president for support, because we know that unless we create positive relationships with the non-Jewish world, wherever they may be, our days may be extended, but they won't be numbered. And so Herzl went to the Ottoman Sultan, and Weizmann went to the British government and Ben-Gurion in the 50s and 60s embraced Kennedy. What if Ben-Gurion hadn't come to this country in 1939 and spent almost 3 of the next 6 years in the United States trying to convince American Jews that Zionism mattered, and going around the country and trying to influence non-Jews that Zionism mattered? If Ben-Gurion hadn't done that lobbying, I'm not sure what would have happened between 46 and 47 if American Jews would have really put their hand up and said, yeah, we absolutely need a state. They probably would have said so because of the results of the Shoah. I think the Hamas-Israel war was a wake-up call. The question now is, what lessons have we learned from it? What do we take from it? Do we lower our voices with those who disagree with us? Do we truly try and create community and not be splintered because of crazy politics, which may not be reconciled at all? Should focus on the things that unite us rather than the things that divide us. That's my view. I'm not a Jewish leader. I am not a president of a shul. I don't have to make a budget other than for my own organization. But the lessons to be learned is that we should have pride in being 1 million, but many tribes. And that's okay. And we should accept the diversity of that and embrace it. And embrace pluralism without pushing people outside the tent. The smaller Jewish community you are in, the tighter probably the connections are within the community. At least that's what I think I've learned after being in the American South for 50 years. It's not like growing up on Long Island or being close to Westchester or New Jersey as I was. It's an amazing community, Southern Jewry. And it's something I've come to learn about and something I've really enjoyed being a part of, even though I still have my New York accent. Oh, Noah, with your permission, I'll shut it down and ask folks if they want to ask a question, please do so.
Thank you, Ken. What I'd like you to do is if somebody has a question, like Lawrence, raise your hand, state your name, the city and state in which you're in. And if you don't know how to raise your hand on Zoom, you can just unmute and call it. But again, please, it's a question, not a dissertation. Lawrence, unmute, please. Lawrence Zimmerman. No, you didn't have a question? Okay, let me start, and then as you all think of a question. Ken, what is Israel's prime strategic initiative for 2026?
To increase its security around its borders, to create a cordon in the north, to eliminate as best you can hostilities to the state of Israel on its eastern border, to stay strategically ready should Iran decide to throw another swarm at you. American potential intervention in the Iranian domestic unrest. Israel, as well as its friendly neighbors like Jordan and Egypt, need to worry about what Iran's reaction will be, as will the Arab Gulf states. Maintaining the security of the country, which also means being sure that the currency remains stable, trade remains high, innovation remains as it was before the war. I guess the best way to translate it would be saying go from kiddush to kiddush without too much kaddish in between.
Thank you. A question? David Post, please unmute. And where are you from?
Sorry, Salisbury, North Carolina. Born in New York, lived there a whole year. I'm one of the, I don't know how many million American Jews that does not speak Hebrew, grew up in a small town in the South. My question is, a lot of the reason we have this group here, Dr. Stein, is that, and thank you, that was really some eye-opening issues. I'm in a little town where I'm one of the 300 or 400 that Noah's working with that's dying because I'm in the younger half of I'm about your age and I'm in the younger half of my congregation. And we've got boatloads of mixed marriages. I've got nieces and nephews who are mixed marriages, and there's no chance in the world that their children consider themselves, Jewish at all. What is going to be the impact of mixed marriages in America? And that diagram you showed, about half the Jews in the world are in the United States and about half are in Israel with a little sliver, 15% or whatever that sliver was, the rest of the world. How's that going to affect just the balance of Jews in the world? Thank you. And I'm going to turn my sound off.
David, first of all, call me Ken. Second of all, your very question contains the answer. Mixed marriages or marriages of a Jew and a non-Jew doesn't necessarily mean that one has to say the blessing before or after the Haftorah, although grandparents would probably prefer that. But growing up with values that are connected to our identity, I think are terribly important. And I think how parents model themselves for their children makes a difference on how, I don't know if there's a word, how embracive they may be of kindness and tikkun olam. And just being non-Jewish doesn't mean that you have to embrace BDS. There's no, you don't have to be a black man in the United States to teach black history. You can be non-Jewish and still teach Jewish history, or still teach an acceptance of the state of Israel. And I'm sure there are many people, whether in a mixed marriage or not, are saying, I don't particularly like Israel's political behavior on X, Y, and Z. Well, I don't like political behavior of some of the folks who are sitting in the Congress or the Senate or in the White House. And it doesn't necessarily have to be 2026. I've had plenty of disagreements with our leaders over the years, but I'm not giving up my patriotism, and I'm not giving up my loyalty to this country, and I'm not giving up my identity to the state of Israel.
Thank you.
I think,
Jackie,
David, quickly, I think you have to work at it. I think we all have to work at it a little harder.
and Jackie Gish, then Emily Burt Hedrick.
Where's Jackie from?
I'm from Glendale, California, a very small congregation. First of all, thank you, Noah, for doing this, and Ken Stein for doing this as well. I have a couple of things. I didn't hear anything about it in the strategic plan of having concerning values and compassion towards Palestinian, especially kids, or anything like that. And should that be part of it? And the other thing is, as Israel is maturing, as you're saying, it's not yet done. It's how does Israel reconcile democracy and being a Jewish state and Netanyahu's corruption and all of those kind of factors as well?
Do you expect me to have an answer to that last question?
I'd love it to have an answer for that.
And then you would probably prefer it in an executive summary, right?
Of course.
Israelis elected their politicians. And some Israeli politicians could have made different decisions before the November 2022 elections, and they didn't. And then you're left with the consequences. Part of being an adult is living with consequences of actions or inactions. If the Labor Party had decided to merge with another left of center party, they both would have ended up in the Knesset and denied the Likud the necessary plurality in order to have the present prime minister. Simple as that. And then you pay for the consequences for your inaction. Of course, who's smart enough to get to the fork in the road and know which one not to take? If I can quote Yogi. I don't have an answer, Jackie. The values that you see coming toward you are not yours. And they may even be offensive. And they may even turn you off. And they may turn your children and your relatives off. But I'm going to put up my hand on behalf of the state of Israel and say, I don't think you throw the state out simply because the leadership is not the way you want it to be. I did not run to Canada on January 7th, 2021. I stayed here because I have faith in American institutions and I have faith as an American citizen. My parents came from Germany in the late 20s and the early 30s. My father said, you always hang the flag up and you always pay your taxes because if they hadn't let us in, you wouldn't be here. So, that's me, immigrant kid. I don't get emotionally entwined to being choked by other people's behavior or misbehaviors. I can't control their misbehaviors. I can only influence my own environment and my own behavior. And I regret, Jackie, I fully regret that we are now in a world where people are more interested in knowing how many people follow them than knowing how many new ideas they poured into their head on a daily basis. We become so consumed with listening to our own voices I've been very lucky. Every day I spend writing or reading something about Israel's establishment or sustaining the state, or because it's how I keep busy and it's how I be productive and it's how I contribute. I don't have a Facebook page. I could care less. I don't care about postings. I only care about postings if it's got content and content.
Thank you. Emily Bird Hedrick, and then
I've gone on too long. Keep going, Noah.
Emily Bird Hedrick, then Jonathan Levine.
Hi there, I'm Emily, and I'm part of a small congregation in Carlisle, Pennsylvania.
Yay.
And I'm very, very interested in the term Israel being not finished. And I have to ask, how will we know when it is finished? Because, I mean, I read the news and it seems to me that things are really getting bad in Israel. I mean, there's prediction that there may be a civil war because the ultra religious versus the more secular, and so I'm just the word finished or not finished. Well, I mean, I tend to agree with you. I mean, things are very unfinished right now, but well, they're kind of that way.
There was a guy in the 80s or 90s, a political scientist. The name was Fukuyama, and he said something. He sort of advocated that this was the end of history or something. History never ends. Israel will never be finished, and it won't be finished in your lifetime or my time, even if we both live to 120. And I don't care. I really, I don't need to see the final product because it's an amalgam of Jews from all over the world that are very creative. It's extraordinarily dynamic, and it's always moving, and it's always spinning, and it's living in a world that's spinning around it. I mean, it's its own solar system, but it also operates around a bigger solar system. And then there are diaspora Jews who are saying, you did it right, you did it wrong, you didn't do enough of it, you did too much of it. I never carried a gun in the Israeli army. I never served for 3 years. I don't think that too many articles or opinion pieces I've written over that period of time where I've ever suggested the Israelis should do X, Y, or Z. That's not my business. My business is to help people understand that we need a Jewish state so Jews can be engaged in self-determination, because that's important to Jewish identity and to the Jewish future, however it's defined. Now, you can legitimately say, Ken, that's a cop-out. Okay. But it gets me through the day.
Jonathan Levine.
I am in Silver Spring, Maryland. I'm honored, blessed to have Noah as my big brother, and I got my law degree from Emory University. My question is,
Sure.
is there no two-state solution because the Palestinian people have never had a Sadat Mandela or George Washington, or is the Arab nation just waiting, biding their time for decades, centuries until they take all of biblical Palestine?
I think it would be helpful if I don't want to go on too long about this, but Palestinian Arab leaders going back a century or more have rejected Jewish presence. That was the early years of the British Mandate. whether it was Jewish presence or Jewish autonomy or Jewish state, there have been those who have said, you don't belong here. That's all. And I have to say that labor socialist Zionism in the 20s and 30s tried to embrace the Arab world. Maybe it's because, or Arab societies in Palestine, because they knew that they had to live with their neighbor. And then I think they got a shock from 36 to 39 when the first Palestinian uprising came, and the Mufti ended up flirting with Hitler. I do believe that leadership matters in an extraordinary way. People with will and courage and foresight can swing 15 to 20% of their population, even if the population is unsure. And with the Muftis, Shukeri, Arafat, and Abbas, they haven't had it. And Sadat was sui generis. Sadat was so different than another Arab leader because he said, Egypt's more important to me. I want Sinai back. I want peace with the United States because I need to better my economy. If the Palestinians and the Israelis have a common external threat, it'll drive them together, even if they don't want to get together. Jonathan, you ask a core question. Absolutely. And I'm hoping your Emory degree helped you be that smart. What year did you graduate, if I may ask?
1980.
Oh, I was still I was all of a 32 or 33-year-old. But glad you were here. Thank you for the question. It was very good. All the questions tonight have been great.
One more question? Anybody have one more question to ask? Shane?
Sure. Hi. Thanks, Ken. Really appreciate it. Shane Aswell from, I think, the only Canadian, Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Maybe the 51st state. Actually, there is a bit of a separatist movement here in Alberta. And we're very kind of similar to Texas. We call ourselves Houston of the North. At any rate, Ken, wanted to ask you, what's your opinion that as we speak, special forces, Mossad, CIA from Israel and the US are in Iran? And do you think that this latest protest movement will actually topple the regime?
Did you just say you have confirmed information that the CIA?
No. I was asking you if you thought that was the case.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm just totally guessing, but my hunch is, yeah, they're active. But I was curious if you had any.
The very question is very smart, because I think those of us who read newspapers, even if it's in a foreign language occasionally, we're only getting about 70% of what's out there. I learned when I started writing about the peace process in the 70s, and the book came out in 99. 20 years later, materials were unfolded and released that, I got about 85% of my book right, Heroic Diplomacy. About 15% I didn't, because I didn't have the information yet. Let's be crystal clear. There are 80 million plus Iranians who have been suffering under economic and personal freedom duress since the Shah left in 79. It's very difficult to topple a regime whose security services were virtually unscathed by the Hamas-Israel war or by Israel's attack on Iran. The internal security network remains strong. And if Iran, as we know, is earning between 35 and 45 billion a year in oil revenues, that's a lot of money that goes into a lot of budgets, into a lot of people's pockets, that pays a lot of salaries, that puts a lot of food on the table. Is the Iranian army or the security services, are they going to put down their weapons and not shoot at their fellow citizens? How many drone attacks could the United States or any other country throw at Iran that would make the Iranian regime not want to stay in power? I think Iran is doing exactly what Hamas did. It's having its arms twisted and hands around its neck. And it's essentially saying, if I have to, I'll negotiate, because my goal here is to make it to next week or next month or next year, and not to unravel the clerical regime which is entwined throughout the entire society and bureaucracy. You have to have a major decapitation of the leadership and the security services, or there has to be internal military revolt. Now, there was in Egypt in 51, 52, and it overthrew the king. When the Shah fell, military didn't step up and, say we want to save him. And the last point I want to make, it's very difficult to orchestrate a revolution when you live 7,000 miles away or 6,000 miles away. It's so very, very difficult. Now, let me ask you a question. How many members of your organization live within a 400-mile radius of Atlanta?
I would say 50%.
50, 60?
Yes.
I hadn't thought this through very much. I'd like to get in a car for 5 weeks, 4 weeks, and go to community and talk to the Jewish community about Israel. Take my own roadshow. Make it up as I go.
Great. Been kicking around an idea of having a JCLP mission to Israel, be our scholar in residence, like you were with the Heritage. So to be continued, that discussion.
Yeah, but the point is that there are people who are 5 and 7 and 11 and 25 and 55. Wouldn't it be great if they could come learn for 2 or 3 hours on a Sunday afternoon?
Great idea.
And do a Tuesday night, and then find someone will invite me for dinner, I'm sure.
It'll be like Charles Kurot on the road. Last word from our VP, Marilyn Chandler.
Good evening, everyone. And I'm here in my triple role maybe, as a member of the Greensboro Jewish community in Greensboro, North Carolina. Also as board member and incoming chair of the board of JCLP, and also board member of the Center for Israel Studies with Ken Stein. And I just want to first say thank you to Noah for planning this program, then to all of you for showing up and participating on this program, and then to Ken Stein, because you're brilliant, and I would love to have you for dinner. In fact, I think I have a long time ago, so it's time again. So just, you and I have had conversations, Ken, about Jewish and Israel studies programs on college campuses, and why there couldn't be more like the one on Emory's campus. And maybe you could address that just a little bit. And by the way, we're all seeing your screen, so you
Just
might
stop
want to
sharing the screen.
stop sharing your screen so you'll get to see everybody on the screen.
Okay. Let's see, where am I going to find this? Okay, stop.
Good. Yeah, stop share. Great. Thank you.
Last word, Ken.
You expect an academic to do it one word?
Yes, yes. We're always into miracles.
Jew, what Ben Gurion says, a Jew who doesn't believe in miracles is not a realist. I don't think you need a full-fledged program. What you need at local universities are 1 or 2 people coming a year to give talks at the college. Maybe, figure $15,000 for 4 talks or $20,000 for 4 talks over 8 months. And that person or 4 different people come and they talk about different aspects of Jewish identity or Israel diaspora relations. And the person speaks on campus once in a class, maybe once in public, and they also give a talk in the Jewish community. And it's $500, $600 to bring that person to the community and keep them overnight, another $200, $300, and you put $1,500 or $1,800 in their pocket. And so the whole thing will be $15,000 or $16,000 annually. You don't need $1 million endowment, which is only going to generate $50,000 a year anyway, or less. All you need is individuals who are going to say, we can do this. And an organization like this one could get a person to come on a weekend and then move on to some other place midweek. It doesn't take a lot of money to bring highly talented people to a location. It's just a matter of organizing it and knowing who to ask. And I can tell you beyond any reasonable doubt, there are at least 18 Israeli academics who are retired, who are in their late 60s because they had to retire, who are some of the best scholars and teachers in the world. We could do tours of them in a region such as the American South or the American Mideast. And here I mean West Virginia, Ohio. I'm not talking about Maryland. For years, I've been telling people it's not a lot of money to make a big difference, to have kids feel like they matter. Have them talk to a group of kids who are going to go on birthright. Have them talk to a youth group that get together. It's just a matter of organizing. Noah, the last answer is, regrettably, we in the Jewish world have been vertical in virtually everything we've done. What you're doing is you're doing this. You're working horizontally. And that's rare, but so sorely needed.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken. Everybody will have an opportunity to listen to the recording as well as to read the material that he's just sent. Thank you all for participating. Thank you for all that you do for your communities. And we have a wonderful advisory committee that helps to put together the programming. We will be letting you know what the programs will be later in this year. And let's just pray for peace in the world and sanity here in America. We love you all. Bye.
Thank you.
Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.
Thank you.